The Joining the Dots podcast focuses on the many challenges facing education and how different approaches and innovations are needed to meet those challenges.
Join co-hosts Matt Jessop and Kingsley as they have discussions with innovative educators, business leaders, policymakers, and other stakeholders, and guests looking at transforming the future of education.
Well, it's another episode, Matt, and for those listening in just purely for the tunes, we've also got human beings to add to the mix for today's conversation. I'm trying to think what episode we're up to, Matt. It's certainly in the teens somewhere.
I'm just struggling now that I'm going to have to share this on the podcast that you and Caroline attended the same Motorhead concert in 1983 is what we've just discovered. And it's completely blown my mind.
We are a trendy group here, and the fact that I've known Caroline for quite a while and we've just discovered a common early phase of liking to rock out, I think just adds another layer of coolness to our conversations.
Absolutely.
Lemmy runs deep.
Absolutely. God bless him. Yes. So,
Lemmy, yeah. Blimey.
So welcome to today's episode. We're going to be talking about all things rock of the 80s, and we're going to see who's coolest. I may have to slip away and find a leather jacket in due course with a few appropriate studs on the shoulders. But on a serious note, as we try and be a little bit on that line between just stuff that's going on at the moment, it's a pleasure to have you, Caroline Allams. Welcome to the show. Many folks, I'm sure, listening will know you from your amazing work with Natterhub and working on all things to keep our young people digitally safe, secure, and with agency in all the things that they do. We start with a bit of a, hey, can you tell us a bit about you? So for those listening, what would be a snapshot of what you'd like to share about your journey, Caroline? Thank
you. Outside Motorhead.
Outside of Motorhead.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. My background is education. I was one of those that grew up, playing schools and bossing imaginary children around the garden with a whistle and a cup of water, and happily found myself in teaching in York, and drawn to early years and Key Stage 1 for the love of learning through play, that creative opportunity to invite children to learn, and realised that social and emotional development was going to become, along with language development, was going to become my passion. And I mention all of this because, here I am on an EdTech podcast. I'm definitely not a techie. Fast forward, I developed Natterhub out of the realisation that we just put children on screens. And here we are. I wanted to create something that was experiential and scenario based. And it seems timely now that we're still dealing with problems that don't seem to be going away. So I've taught in the UK, globally, in Hong Kong, Barcelona, little stint in Amsterdam. I've been very blessed to have taught in exciting places.
You've been all over the place, but we talk about all sorts of different topics. But what would you say now is the number one concern you have for our youngsters? What's the thing that you think is the biggest issue we should be mindful of and amplifying?
The one thing.
We could say a list of 10, couldn't we, really, here? There's an element of how do we keep them safe. There's an element of how do we actually make them feel like they fit. And there's an element of how do we make children happy. They all go in that mix, don't they?
I think the relevance of our education system has to be sort of up there with, are we actually preparing them for life beyond school? And, what are those critical soft skills or the power skills, whatever we want to call them? What are they, and how do they tangibly fit into our curriculum, so that teachers have a green light to focus on what really matters? I think that obviously navigating a digital landscape is key. And I think it's, pretty often underplayed because of a crowded curriculum. I think really it's about preparing children with what they need in order to thrive outside of school.
Come on, Matt. That sounds like a conversation I have with you on a very regular basis. You absolutely build around those kind of core strands, don't you?
Yes, we can. I think it's nice to see more and more people doing it, but I still think it's a niche group of people doing it. I think you've got it spot on there, Caroline, in that those power skills, those soft skills is a terrible term, is what the children need now more and more than the actual traditional GCSEs, or certainly alongside them. But our whole education system and the purpose of our education system is it needs a huge review, doesn't it? And it's not getting what it needs, really.
Yeah, I think so often, we hear that children don't have the resilience, or they don't have the skills they need to be able to be flexible, to be able to adapt to. And I just think they're faced with so much. There's so much that children are dealing with, and now that outside of school, life is so kind of dopamine inducing and opportunistic if you've got access to it. And yet in school, so often they are required to be sedentary, to be quiet, to not question, and if you like, an analog environment. And that switch between school and what they are experiencing outside of school, along with the bigger subjects that contribute to sort of generalised apathy for young people who kind of look ahead and don't see a clear route, or a clear path, when it's overshadowed by such big conversations around climate, around politics, around digital, around the future of their world. I just think they've got a lot going on.
And with the two of you, because you're obviously very similar, well, actually the three of us have got a very similar perspective and things that we've shared, there always feels like there's a gap, because there's strong voices trying to share this kind of perspective of we need to be shifting in terms of relevance and appropriateness. If we want to get better attendance in schools, we need to make them places where children feel that it's the right fit for them and they can thrive. But there also seems to be a gap that parents having that perspective of what is needed for their children from an education perspective. I mean, sometimes we've talked in other conversations about the optics negativity around it, but you do a lot of work focusing around empowering young people to keep them safe, but also to navigate this new digital world in the right way. How do we close the gap around that and the needs of what learners should really be engaging with, actually educating parents as well? Because that for me feels like that's, if anything, the growing gap. I mean, Matt, you see it at the school gate every day, so you have a different perspective too, I'm sure.
I think it's a very valid point, isn't it, really, that whatever schools choose to do with the pupils or learners of any age, you've still got that huge discrepancy amongst parents, that some are very active in ensuring their children are safe online. Some are blissfully unaware and completely apathetic and don't actually understand the dangers that are out there. And some are another approach to education, to just using devices. But I mean, it's whatever you do with the learners of 3 to 16, you think, we've got to educate that generation above them. And I worry quite a lot about pensioners. I've got parents in their late 70s and 80s, and you think that they struggle online now. Give it 3 or 4 years, banks in Kendal are all closing. There's virtually none left. They're going to have to do everything online, and it feels like a societal issue that we've got, that education should be at the forefront of addressing, but actually not much is happening.
Yeah, I think parents are notoriously tricky to bring into that equation. I don't know if you found this, Matt, but the schools that I speak to have seen a big shift pre-COVID, whereby obviously we know as educators that triangular approach is really impactful whenever you want support, whether it's learning to read, supporting with a bit of this, bit of that at home, or just bringing in a bit of job modelling. But I think pre-pandemic, parents were much more open to coming into schools. And it seemed a little bit easier to be able to tag on online safety and guidance for parents when they're in school. But getting parents into school now seems to be becoming harder and harder. You know, parent evenings have gone online usually, and I don't know if it's the same in your school, but a lot of schools.
I mean, it's an interesting one, that, because we're very lucky. I've just dropped about 20 of our parents in the Lake District to do a 21-mile walk for us for charity, so we're very lucky we've got very engaged parents.
Yeah.
And parents' evening is not... I know exactly what you mean, though, and from speaking to other heads, that's definitely an issue in terms of parental engagement. As a secondary school dad, as it were, the 3 minutes per subject for secondary school parents' evening, and you don't have enough slots to speak to every teacher, so you have to pick someone you're not going to speak to, happening every 2 or 3 years, has blown my mind as a primary school head teacher, because I can't envisage how parents can possibly keep on top of what they're doing at secondary school, or the children do at secondary school. But, I mean, the other thing I just think is that I'm vaguely au fait, I think, with modern technology and what's out there, but we send things from like the National College to parents, and some of these social media platforms and things that we download, the help sheets and warning sheets, I've never heard of them. And you just think, as a reasonably technologically advanced school, we've never heard of them. How are the parents supposed to have heard of them? How do you possibly keep on top of it all? It's impossible.
And I think, I mean, you've touched on something that I feel really passionate about, and also ties in with our approach with Natterhub, because I think the approach to online safety and supporting parents, or trying to support parents with giving them a whole library of content that they can then go away and try and unpick. As you said, it's so overwhelming that it then becomes its own problem. And to the same extent to schools, to expect teachers to suddenly know and have knowledge about every platform, every game, everything that the children are playing on, communicating on, etc., seems to be too much of a big ask. And I know that from the work that we do with parents, if we look at online safety and our relationship with technology and the relationships that we carry out through technology, it's actually the online behaviour that creates the potential vulnerability. I know that we can obviously we could fill this whole session with the impact of clever algorithms. And so I don't know if it's fair really to sort of say technology is now neutral. I know that was the term that was previously kind of pitched, but I think if we look at supporting online behaviour, you flipped it to actually what are the practical things that we as parents can employ that are actually going to make a difference. And if we talk to our children as teachers in a way that's asking them to lift the lid on their online experiences and communicate about what's going on, we as teachers are well versed in managing behaviour. So let's talk about expectations around online behaviour. Sorry.
You too find, I mean, Alan, your group of schools, and Caroline, all the schools you work at, what we find here is that everybody in the past 5, 6, 7 years, whether they're parents, teachers, whatever, is busier and busier. And there seems less and less time, and you think, this technology is supposed to save us time, but we seem to be spending more and more time on technology, and we seem to have less and less time to actually sit back and do other things. Life is just chaotic for everybody. It gets worse every year.
I'm going to let the lovely Caroline go first.
Oh, thanks. Well, I would say that we're busy, inverted commas. We're busy, but are we actually more productive? And I think the distraction of technology is a big factor in that. And I think the distraction of parents. I know you've already mentioned, older people, but the distraction of parents is impacting our children's lives, and especially when we look back towards early years education, 0 to 5, we're still waiting for statutory guidance around the use of technology and digital around those youngest children. And our children are growing up in a world with very distracted parents. And so I agree. I think that, yes, we are busier than ever because it's more accessible than ever. People can reach you at any time. And there is this need to respond, or this obligation to respond. And yes, I think we are busier than ever, because the blurred boundaries between, oh, this is my work life and this is my home life, has all gone to cock, as we say in Yorkshire. But I think that the distraction is a big factor of that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think not quite reminiscing back to our days rocking it with Motorhead, Caroline, but I do think we recognise that societal shift that, keep it really simple. When you left work, nobody could contact you till Monday morning. Then we have the advent of email. We have a phone that suddenly we can carry around with us. We have a watch that reminds us when there's a message, and it follows through. And I definitely resonate with you, Matt, when I see across our trust and our schools, where we always say, well, we're going to introduce some technology because it's going to free up some capacity and time. The conversation is never to free it up so that you can pause, reflect, go home early. It's to free up capacity and something else slips in. You've got more time to speak to some more parents, to follow up on something else. And that is a real challenge. But I do think this bit about the connection of recognising the link more closely with parents and students, it's very easy to say, well, it's just all on the schools, or it's just all on the students, and it ties in with, post-hate, anxious generation, Caroline, this mindset that, the phone, just get rid of that device. Actually, I'm a real believer that one of the biggest changes, whether it's language adoption, whether it's confidence of our learners arriving in school, whether it's their biggest challenge for many coming into our school, is their readiness to move into early years foundation stage, has to be linked to the fact that a lot of the time it's the parent that's engrossed in the phone, that the conversation quota within the household has significantly diminished in the last 10 or 15 years. And that's not societal against certain cohorts of families. That's across the board. Technology has taken away more of the human interaction that happens, which is then got to be vocabulary adoption, all the other things. But I also think it builds into a child's social emotional wellbeing and mental health, in the sense of the proximity and accessibility of those parental figures that they can engage with. Now maybe I'm going off too far down that avenue, but I think sometimes we're so quick to look for something to blame. We don't think that actually there's a much bigger shift in the way that we act as human beings in those spaces.
It's in your book, Al, isn't it, about somebody suggesting using AI clip-ons or labels or whatever for lonely children, and you think, blimey, if we're actually even considering that,
I know.
We have failed dismally as a family, as a society, as educators.
Is it the point where I introduce Steve, who's my new best
I was going to mention Steve, and glasses as well, Meta glasses.
On a plus point, you can have an AI that always agrees with you. On a negative point, if anybody says that's a substitute for a human being, just stop them, because they clearly don't understand that the more our world becomes technology interlaced, the value comes full circle back to Caroline's point. It's those power skills. It's the most human aspects of what makes us that are what will allow us to stand out and be successful in the world. But that all ties back, Caroline, to children feeling, I guess, less anxious, feeling more, comfortable in their space and their connections with others.
Well, I think you mentioned stepping back and reflecting on our situation, and especially with technology. I think online safety and AI safety, digital citizenship has to come from a place of reflecting on. We know that children are, right from 9-10 months old, can swipe across a screen. Wow, we're so impressed that they're so clever. But of course, what Leah doing there possibly is confusing the ability to explore and be curious about the functionality, which, of course, when you go back to your chatbot, AI friend, children can easily access that, but actually, can they cope with the interactivity? And that's where online vulnerability comes in. If you can't cope with the interactivity and the fallout of those digital interactions, then we've got issues surrounding well-being and mental health, and that the tunnel that children can go in. So I think pausing and reflecting, which seems crazy when we know, as you said, Matt, teachers are already so busy. But I think talking to children about online safety and giving them an experience that can be unpicked and unpacked in a school environment can go so far into creating that protection. Because if children have got access to technology, but they're not actually understanding the gravitas of what they are doing, or how that might be, developing habits that they're not sure they can keep control of, or that they're not really understanding. It's an abstract space, and children, as we know, are not very good at perceiving potential risk in abstract spaces. So we need to make it tangible. And if we're not making it tangible, or encouraging them to think about what's actually happening when you're talking to an AI bot rather than a human being that genuinely cares about you, unless we're stopping to have those conversations, we're not really able to equip them with the skills they need.
I think it's an element of finding a way to take that mindset, Caroline, and also recognise that distills across to many adults as well, not necessarily understanding that bigger picture. And I'd argue that the same way as unpicking it and making it a conversation that's tangible and relatable to young people is no different in one strand to what we're seeing, this sudden increase in project-based learning, and actually children engage in things that they can actually see purpose in and relevance in. Then, not surprisingly, who'd have thought it, suddenly we get greater output as a result, because children kind of want to understand that. And I think that's far better than a natural persuasion in every education system around the world, which is, here's something that could be harmful, could be used in the wrong way. We'll just put a stop sign on it. We'll just ban it. That's the safest solution, isn't it? Ban it until you're 18. And when you walk out the school building, you're on your own, completely ignorant to the risks that are posed. But that, in essence, is where we often end up. And it rarely gets called out in quite as black and white a way, I guess.
And I think, bans, we know, obviously, that with the smartphone-free childhood movement, there's so much that I can align with. I love the vision of it. It would be great to think that our children come home from school and pull on their welly boots and run out and stay out till their, nourishing dinner is prepared and delivered. But that's not the reality of what we're dealing with right now. And I think the responsibility that we have as parents, as educators, that agency approach, that responsibility that we have is that we have to educate children from where they are right now. And
So you're coming from a healthy moderation point of view. It's a bit like those conversations was, I'm an expert and my recommendation is a child should have no more than 1 hour on a screen per day. And it's like, hang on a second, isn't it about what the child's doing that's the conversation point we have? And that absolutely anyone can say, look, you should be able to have access to a device. I agree. Child should better spend 20 hours a day playing Minecraft on it. Well, clearly there's a parenting issue there, but as always, there's much more nuance that you try and build into that conversation, I guess.
Can I just ask Matt a question? Al, you were just talking about, obviously, something that I'm super passionate about, that inquiry-led, that experiential, scenario-based learning. How much leeway do you feel that you have in your school to include that kind of pedagogy when you've got, SATs to pass? Is there a disconnect? And can you
control yourself, Matt?
I think I'd have to sit back and be honest and say that when I started as a head, which is 13, 14 years ago at this school, the focus was on SATs and league tables. And now my focus every year is on giving the staff, and it is the staff that drive it all, the freedom, and I facilitate, and they do amazing stuff. And I never walk in a class and see kids sat there in rows quietly doing stuff. They're always engaged and active and things like that. Our two core strands are technology and outdoors. So we try and balance it out, because we've just written to parents to say we're going to teach your kids how to use AI. Because I'm of the firm belief that they're seeing it all the time, they're using it all the time, they don't even know it, but they need to know the ethical aspects behind it. They need to know about, actually, when they're talking to Alexa, that is using what they're asking it and learning about them, and they're going to see a marketing email appear in their email accounts or later on. And the sooner we start to do it, the better. But the staff have complete freedom here. We are, within that, very aware that Ofsted will be here in 2.5 years, and already sort of saying we're probably going to get slated. Our stats results, having said that, are above national average, so you never know. But last time they came, they wouldn't report on the technology, they wouldn't report on the outdoor learning because now they were national curriculum. So, but I think I'm probably within that niche group of educators that take that approach.
Yeah, no,
which is sad.
It is, and I we work with at schools, and there are some incredible, like yourself, visionary heads but I think I feel frustrated that it takes a level of bravery on your part to be able to give your teachers that autonomy and that freedom, and it shouldn't be like that. Pardon?
No, but it's more anger than bravery. But I mean, I've got two daughters at secondary, and and I keep slating this secondary school in some ways. It is a lovely secondary school. The pastoral care is off the charts. Yeah. Kids are happy. There's virtually no issues, but they are fully focused because of accountability systems on Progress 8. And it drives me insane. And I spoke to schools in Portugal last week and schools in Spain that are not held accountable, and they're teaching life skills, they're teaching digital skills. They can still choose curriculums, American English curriculums, and go for those traditional qualifications because it is still a valid pathway to higher education. But I mean,
there's a whack-a-mole going on here, though, in our education system. At the earliest stage, most of the schools I kind of have involvement with, it feels like there's a whack-a-mole that goes on between, we've got to have all our focus on phonics. No, it's on numeracy. No, it's on literacy. This is the data we're chasing this year.
Now. Oracy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oracy is the thing. Who knew that letting children talk when they're learning now has a label? We call it oracy, and we're going to get really good at oracy. That blows my mind.
But can we just mention phonics? Because I know
3 hours a day on some schools are focused on everything's about getting your phonics and your phonemes, and it's like
I walk through. I've never taught phonics. I've got a vague awareness of it. I walk through and watch the teachers in awe, and they're saying the same sound that it's spelt 4 different ways. And I'm thinking, how the hell are kids supposed to do it?
I know.
At the moment, we're teaching them to recognise nonsense words. Why?
We have to get the wrong words so the kids can spot them. But the funny thing is, you often walk into a classroom and you're like, there's a child sat on the mat there with 29 others, and that wall they're staring at is just a mass of cards and phonemes with all these different words that sound out the same but have different meaning. Yeah. And you do question it, and then you have these conversations. Well, it depends what phonics scheme you're following and who you're using. And I get in terms of the, methodologies and approaches, but what happens is the conversation is always but at what expense? What isn't being discussed and taught because you're chasing the holy grail on that? The same with you, as you've raised, when it comes to thinking further up the chain of our older learners. We're obsessed with assessment and progress. For many schools, it's how many kids have you got entered in against EBAC targets, and it's like, well, based on this cohort, we'd be setting them up for failure. So no, we're not anywhere near what the government wants. But since when did we put kids into exams that they're not suited to rather than the ones they're going to excel at?
Do you not think with the phonics thing, it's the fact that you have to do it? It's that one size, one approach fits all. Because we had a child left us last year. Real difficulties with language. And I remember speaking to the head psych, and the head psych recommended one-to-one phonics sessions. And we were like, well, he's done this for 7 years now. It doesn't work. Can we try something else? No. And you think, I never learned phonics as a kid, and I can spell reasonably well. And you think, why can't there be an option in schools to actually not do something different to phonics sometimes? For some children, it works better. And I can never understand the nonsense words. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I am wholly with you there. My specialism of old was language development, and I always thought it was such a privilege to teach children to read as a reception teacher. And you think about the love of reading that has been killed by the teaching of phonics and phonics reading schemes. I mean, is there anything more dry? But
some of the books, Caroline, in the schemes are so bad, horrific. So dull, and you think, how are we supposed to get kids interested in reading?
Yeah, exactly. But
you must use one of these schemes,
You must use one of them. You go through no, you're not on blue, you're on green. And don't move outside of that. And then I saw this really depressing article in The Guardian last week about over half of parents no longer enjoy reading to their child.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And I was so saddened by that. But I wonder if we are losing a love of reading because of technology, because of phonics. I'm definitely happy to blame phonics for a lot of that.
I mean, there is a balance, isn't there? I always like the yin and yang of these because we can all see there's a reduction in the love of reading. In the same way as I hold my hand up and say I'd much rather read a paper book than a digital book. There's something about the holding and the sense of engaging in a book and changing your mind with it. But from an accessibility point of view, there are also some great reading resources where digital can really make reading accessible, and also all children can be reading the same pseudo colour book, but the language that's presented might be adaptive depending on their needs. And I quite like the sense that all the children can feel like they're at the same stage when they're not really. But there is definitely a disconnect. I mean, phonics has been around since 98. I think the Labour digital strategy kind of pushed it into the conversation, and then the Rose report or something like that. But it's been around a long time. But you do question, are we locked in sometimes when it comes to, and it isn't specifically phonics, it's any of these disciplines. If you've got a generation of educators who've all been told this is the way and the things you must deliver as part of, in this case, primary curriculum, it's really hard to turn around and say, actually, we're going to be bold, do a review, say this isn't necessarily the best way, let's change, without providing the capacity in the system to reskill or to refocus on what might be more appropriate as a technique, and how do you measure it?
It's crackers, isn't it, that our education system is so politicised that we can't easily access research-based approaches that work, because we are, funneled towards this box-ticking exercise of, meeting targets, and that one size fits all. Sorry, I'm going to let Matt answer your question in a minute, Al. But what that you were saying about having a balance. Some people like to choose a book. Some people like to, read it on a Kindle. If we have proper connections with our learners as educators, and we understand what they're interested in and how they're going to engage and what they're going to need to be invited to get the maximum learning opportunity out of that lesson, and we've got capacity to do that, then teachers are really creative beings and can adapt and can be flexible and can pull things out of the bag that they haven't planned on a sheet that's been submitted to some head of department. They need to have autonomy to be able to do that.
Imagine that. They might actually let their children spend more time in more free flow learning rather than what we just talked about. Maybe they need an alpaca or three thrown into the mix, Matt.
Yeah, I'll just say listening, and I think reception baseline is a nonsense to us because they've been with us for 2 years by that point in nursery. And that's the first time we actually set up kids to fail, because some will fail on the criteria set. Reception baseline is of no use to us as a school, and the teachers have no interest. The reports are absolutely pathetic anyway. It's a stick to beat us with progression.
Come on, don't sit on the fence, Matt.
Oh, no, I never do. The phonics test is the next time that some are going to fail. And they're labelled as such, and then they might fail again in year 2. And then you've got a year 4 times tables test, which actually I'm not as against that one, because I think if you know the basic maths things, you've got a big head start. SATs, schools aren't interested, our families aren't interested, the kids aren't interested. What the hell are we doing them for? Because we didn't, within 2 years in COVID, we didn't bother. There was absolutely no downside to that whatsoever. But yeah, I think it's everything you both saying resonates with me a lot, and
it's our connected world, the same way as in previous conversations we've had, Matt, with guests. We've talked about how, our A-level standards have been set up based on what universities wanted, so they could create their own measures and thresholds many, many moons ago for admission criteria, and that filters all the way down. Their argument, in many regards, is SATs for the benefit of the child and the parents, or is it so that schools can have a more effective Progress 8 measure, they think, when the child moves through into a secondary You've got to have an active baseline to measure against. But then you get all the conversations about, well, yeah, but then you've got the progress between that halfway point at end of year 2 and end of year 6. And are we comparing apples with apples? And the point is, if we're only doing it so that somebody outside of the ecosystem can use it as a measure, another stick, then again, it immediately says, hang on a second, didn't we all agree we were in this for the best interest of the child?
Do you think it's an England thing, though, or a UK thing? And like, our educators in this country, the only thing keeping the education system going, despite all the challenges, I'm a big believer, they're in it for the right reasons. But in other countries, educators being checked by external accountability systems and lacking the respect and the freedom to do what they think is best wouldn't be tolerated. Other countries are way ahead of us. Yeah, other countries.
There are some that are equally
far
and locked into their thing. But you're right, and we see it around the world, don't we? We often look in the context of our conversations here, which are often technology linked in some shape or form, or the digital world. We often look to the independent sector that tend to be flying the flag a couple of years ahead, based on their resources, frankly, to try new things, and we see how that ripples through. But we also see national education systems pivoting when they see opportunity. Most recently, we've got countries saying we're going to make sure that every child has AI as part of the curriculum. Well, with the best will in the world, we could all sit here and say that's meaningless until we actually talk about context and relevance and what that looks like. But there absolutely are systems that pivot. The same way as we talk about that sword of Damocles here, Matt, we've talked before, in the US, they have their NAEP scoring across the education systems, NAEP. And that's something that's done where they, a little bit like doing the PISA rankings, but it's a subset of children from different schools across counties and states and nationally, and they create their scoring system, and that gives them a measure of performance underperforming state schools. But there is a bit of a tag with that, much as I'm not a fan of the NAEP scores, because again, it's all that thing about we're all driven to read the kind of the data. There is also some money that comes with the context of your school's underperforming. You need to focus on this area. Here's some resources to help you on the way. And I would argue the same would apply if we started talking about these kind of, we're all doing these league tables for what person, just so that somebody in Whitehall can say this region's better than this region. If it came with a thing that said, actually, you're struggling here, we're going to give you some funding, so you've got some extra capacity for teaching assistants or whatever it might be that you need as extra support and nurture, people might say, well, thank you. But as it stands, we get, you're not doing well enough, improve. PS, no extra capacity or resources, just figure it out. And people don't recognise that some of the biggest challenges in our system are not about professional practitioners doing the wrong things. It's simply capacity in the system to do what they need to do.
I'm in a lovely area with lovely supportive parents and communities, and I'm held to the same accountability system as head teachers in seriously deprived areas with serious issues, and that's another thing alongside it. And they, if they had that extra support, I just wonder.
Yeah, but that's the disparity we see, isn't it? And I think that flies through to, I've had that conversation when I've seen over the years. I'm doing all sorts of bits with Caroline and Manjit and the good team at Natterhub. We always come back to that focus about actually sometimes that because of those pressures, the things that we're really passionate about, digital citizenship, online safety, all the bigger picture, it ceases to be an essential. It's like an optional. You have all these amazing resources, and half the schools are like, well, I'd love to, but I've got other priorities. I've got to keep the lights on, or I've got to cover the offset if we've got a load of staff on absence and we've got to cover. At least in the short term, that's changed, Caroline, from a Natterhub perspective, hasn't it?
Well, yeah. What I'm really interested in tackling over the next few months is, everybody knows that online safety should be embedded across the curriculum. Everybody nods like, yeah, that's how we should be tackling it. But nobody can embed online safety across the curriculum because there isn't anything available that allows you to easily do that. If children are not online, they're not. You can't teach them online safety at school. And we know that you can have a list of don'ts on the wall about what children can behave and keep safe, and children will rattle these off to you when you talk to them. But I really want to expand Natterhub beyond just online safety specific lessons, and we're looking to offer Natterhub as a cross-curricular tool with the online safety features embedded into it, so that we're moving away from the idea that, you know, we can take children to the school hall, we can teach them all their swimming strokes without actually putting them in the water. But don't worry, when you get to the swimming pool, you'll know exactly what to do because I've taught you all the strokes. So, because the lesson delivery that we've got within Natterhub is one of its real strengths, the children are very engaged. The teacher, there isn't the onus on the teacher to be really tech savvy, or even those that are a bit reticent about technology can kind of dive in. And you've got this interactivity where teachers are asking a question, and instead of one person putting their hand up, you've got everybody responding digitally. It's a nice mix of this maximising children's ability to multitask, really, because you've got digital communication and verbal communication going on. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited about integrating cross-curricular content within Natterhub, so that teachers have got this opportunity to embed online safety across the curriculum, because it can't be a standalone, because it, as you say, everybody's too busy, and then it is still a tag on, it's still an additional. And those schools that are already really aware, like you, Matt, are already aware that it needs to be a core strand. We need to raise the relevance of it, and realise that our children are spending 4, 5, 6 hours a day. Now, regardless of our opinion on that, that's we know to be true. So it's really critical that we are giving them the right digital skills and savvy to thrive.
I remember looking at Natterhub when I said 5, 6 years ago, Caroline, and thinking there was 300 lessons or something at the time, thinking, how on earth would a school find the time to teach all these? And it was very flippant comments, but now I'm thinking that actually... Right. No, but now I'm with you in that actually it should be front and centre, and cybersecurity soft skills, in my book, should be up there with maths and English, if not ahead of them. But the whole curriculum makes it difficult. Cross-curricular work makes it more appealing. The Natterhub free offer through your supporters is amazing. But my concern, or my question to you maybe, is that the English education system is so fractured in terms of local authorities, maths, government. How are you going to get that known to people? How are you going to make them aware that actually there is a solution here that every school could use for free for the next year, which is a huge, huge thing and should be front and centre of every school's approach, but other pressures like our references. How are you going to actually get word out there that, hey, we've got something you can use?
Well, that is a great question. This is how my days are spent trying to work this out, and I think that we've already got an incredible loyal database of schools who've used Natterhub and in the past when it was a paid for SaaS model, and we had this. What we did have was this incredible renewal rate. It was sort of in its almost 90% renewal rate on subscription. So once teachers start using it, they like it. They see the engagement. They see that the children just run with it. And that was part of my, when I first set out designing Natterhub, I'm sure like yourself, I was sick of software that had been created for corporate environments and shoehorned into primary schools that was not age appropriate, that the UX and the UI was not easy for our youngest children to work with. I've still never met a teacher that says, "Oh, I love Microsoft Teams." And I think that what I wanted to create was something that was really age appropriate, engaged, that looked like it had been designed for children, that happened to be really nice for teachers to engage with as well. And really, what we need to work on now is we've set up a regular demo slot. We've broken up webinars that can be easily accessible, so they happen across the week now, that teachers can drop into. Obviously, the reach that Twinkle has been instrumental in getting the word out there. for what is now freely available to primary schools. And I just hope that we can reach those teachers and say, look, just give us a few minutes so that we can show you now what is available to you. And I think that once we've expanded it to become cross-curricular as well, we've got this real opportunity for, okay, I've now got more than one, just online safety as a reason to drop into this session to find out more about it. And also, I love the idea of something being bottom up, not top down. And so what we find is that communicating with individual teachers is often our best route, that you catch the attention of one teacher and they're like, oh, I love this, I'm going to share this with my school. And I think that that's something as well that we've had significant success at.
Love that, Caroline. Yeah, I'm going to be the slight grown up on this one, which is we've slightly overrun our time slot before our next one. So I'm going to ask us for a little bit of a quick kind of wrap up and close on this one. I think, as always, with many of our good guests, Caroline, very high on that list. We'll probably end up doing another discussion in due course. Because there's so many things to cover. Caroline, where can folks find out more about what you're doing and connect with you personally as well?
Yes, I'd love to hear from anyone who wants support or, to learn how to get stuck in. Go to Natterhub.com for our website. All our information is on there. There's work to be done on there, but we're getting to it. Natterhub.com. Sign up, engage get your schools to subscribe. Also on LinkedIn at Caroline Allams. The usual channels, but I'd be really happy to speak to anyone.
There's so many great events going on at the moment that Caroline, I know from first-hand experience, a great person to get to come along and speak at your event to talk about the topics that she's super passionate about. You might need to make the conference 8 hours long so she can fit in all of her words of wisdom. But I really think this is something that is just becoming more and more important. So the more we can be shouting about it, the better, Caroline. Matt, final words from you, my friend.
Nothing actually is worth it. Mention what Caroline signposted at Natterhub.com. I think the fact that it's got a parent sign up as well is something that is very relevant. It's not just schools, it's families as well, isn't it?
Oh, we're doing music now. I feel like I'm at the Oscars.
Just do a very quiet background.
Not Motorhead, but it's nice. Yeah.
Oh.
Caroline, as always, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Caroline.